Support WrestleTalk!
I'm on the right channel. Okay. Nothing has changed since last week. What's going on, WrestleTalk friends and fans? I am Tempest from WrestleTalk.com, and I am here to bring you this week's WrestleTalk recap. We've got another packed show for you today, so let's move right on to the match of the week. The match of the week this week is going to be a fairly easy one to place, as Best Friends took on Santana and Ortiz in the main event of AEW Dynamite in a parking lot brawl. The match received a 5-star rating from Dave Meltzer, the first in AEW Dynamite history, and it was the very best street fight that Jim Ross has ever called. His words, not mine. The show of the week is a little bit harder to place this week. We had excellent episodes of NXT and AEW Dynamite, but you know what? I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path and tell you that you need to watch the Ring of Honor Pure Championship Tournament. This episode of Ring of Honor was unlike anything else going on right now in American pro wrestling. It is a strictly sport-based program, and you need to go and watch it. There were 2 matches this week. One was Jay Lethal against Dalton Castle. The other was Wheeler Yuta against Jonathan Gresham, and they were both excellent. You really need to go and check it out for the sake of pro wrestling as we know it. Flipping the page over to the news, we had Ricochet and his WWE status. The reports seem to indicate that he may be leaving WWE in the near future. Well, he refuted those reports, saying that they didn't know what they were talking about and saying yada 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 on Twitter. Keep in mind that this seems to be a bit of a trend when people are leaving or entering a promotion, as seen with Brian Cage and Edge earlier this year, refuting reports of their impending signings and returns. So we will just have to wait and see to know absolutely for sure what the future of Ricochet will hold. Next up, we had a little bit of shooting going on in AEW Dynamite, as Evil and Thunder Rosa's match was a little bit stiffer than it should have been. Finally, it was reported by PW Insider that former WWE Women's Champion Melina will be returning to the program as early as next week. It was a pretty good week for pro wrestling on television, as Raw kicked off with Retribution and the Hurt Business colliding in the main event. The 2 factions clashed in a brawl as Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre's main event match went awry, with the 2 big men diving onto the pile of the 2 heel factions. Also on Raw, you had Dominic Mysterio taking on Seth Rollins in a steel cage match as the Mysterio family watched on from ringside. And then finally, you had Mickie James doing such a good job of selling a beating from Asuka that the referee thought she was legitimately hurt and called off her match. As we previously mentioned, we had the Ring of Honor Pure Tournament with the 2 matches that we already said. Really good, you should go watch it. And for all of you out there that really wanted me to talk about Impact, yes, Impact happened this week as well. Trey Miguel and TJP had an excellent little match that you should also go out of your way to see. That takes us to Wednesdays, where first up we have NXT. Now, the main event of NXT featured Damian Priest defending the NXT North American Championship in a really good little match against Timothy Thatcher. But the biggest news of the night were the 2 major announcements made by William Regal. With their next TakeOver event less than 3 weeks away, William Regal scheduled 2 number 1 contendership matches for next week's show. The number 1 contender for the NXT Women's Championship will be decided next week in a Battle Royal, while the number 1 contender for the NXT Men's Championship will be decided in a gauntlet match akin to that of Lucha Underground. There was also a really good match between Shotzi Blackheart and Io Shirai. It's worth mentioning as it did get Match of the Week votes. You should go check that one out too. Over on the other channel, there was another really good episode of AEW Dynamite as the Young Bucks continue their slow burn heel turn. We got the announcement that next week Jon Moxley will team with Darby Allin and the newly signed Will Hobbs to take on his future challenger Lance Archer, as well as Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. And then in the main event, we had the aforementioned street fight between the Breast Friends, no. Then we had the main event, which was the aforementioned street fight between the Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz. Best Friends were able to pick up the win as Trent's mom Sue just flipped them the bird on the way out. And on SmackDown, you had the Intercontinental Championship program take a turn as Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, and Sami Zayn will now take part in a 3-way ladder match for the Intercontinental title. Alexa Bliss continued her turn to the dark side as she hit Sister Abigail on Lacey Evans after Evans' match with Nikki Cross. And finally, the Big Pupper Roman Reigns just stared a hole through Jey Uso at the end of SmackDown, leading to their match at Clash of Champions. It is currently 6:30 a.m. and we have just gotten through watching the G1 Climax tournament, day 1. It was very good. The best matches of the show were Tomohiro Ishii versus Minoru Suzuki, Shingo Takagi versus Jay White, and the main event of Kota Ibushi versus Kazuchika Okada. As you might expect, these were 3 of the best matches you will see all week, or for many other weeks in that matter entirely. So check out the live reactions for this show from myself and Randy Andy Datson right here on Wrestle2. If you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go to bed. Make sure you head on over to WrestleTalk.com, where we have a number of new features this week, including Randy Andy Datson's feature on what went wrong with the Nexus. It's worth the read. Back over on YouTube, you have Adam Blampier's latest list of the 10 greatest heel turns in WWE history.
While heel Roman may be one of this generation's most defining characters, there are definitely bigger and better turns in WWE's long history of bad dudes badding on other dudes with their badness.
And right here on Wrestle2, you need to check out Louis Dangoor's 2 interviews this week, one with Santana and Ortiz, and the other with indie superstar A-Kid. Also here on Wrestle2, you can check out Randy Andy Datson and I taking you through the G1 Climax tournament with our live reactions of Day 1. Over on Parts Fun Known, you can check out the latest edition of Calling Spots, entitled The Birth of Shane McMahon. How did this Bible get here?
To remember.
It could not have been a more well-known story.
In case you missed it, Pete Quinnell, unhappy with Mr. WrestleTalk, decided to give him a Luke detector test. Is Mr. WrestleTalk Luke?
You just need to say back to me, Raven is not the best wrestler of all time.
Oh, Luke loved Raven. Oh, it's like one of his favorite wrestlers.
And if you're not a Pledgehammer, make sure you head over to the WrestleTalk Patreon page, where you can sign up and check out Mr. Davis and Mr. WrestleTalk reviewing one of the most important wrestling shows in recent memory, All In. Coming up this week, we have Quizzlemania 19, the work rate Quizzlemania, if you will, and it'll be the first episode in a long time without Sean Ross Sapp. What will happen? We'll have to wait and see. And that just about wraps it up for another edition of the WrestleTalk Recap. Make sure you give this video a like, give us a subscribe, make sure you subscribe to all of WrestleTalk's YouTube channels, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Our Instagram is at WrestleTalk.official, our Twitter is at WrestleTalk_TV. You can follow me at Twitter at TempestWT, and I will see you next time.